In 2000, I was born in Australia into a migrant family, leaving me to navigate this land against a conflict of ethnic identity.
In 2002, my family and I moved from Ireland to Australia. I spent my developmental years learning about and experiencing the country.
In 2007, my mum and I moved from China to Australia, where we wrestled with the cultural challenges that came with education, personal growth, and relationships.
In 2016, I left my homeland China, arriving in Brisbane to study as a high school student. I distinctly remembered the feeling of arriving by myself, isolated.
In 2020, I arrived in Brisbane to begin my architectural studies. My life has been ingrained with the migrant experience from a young child adopted to Vietnam, to living in Canada, to being an international student in Australia.
The migrant experience of Australia is so profoundly varied, and yet a constant within individual experiences. The distinction of isolation and navigating to local communities to feeling a sense of belonging. The narrative of the migrant in Brisbane starts at the airport going through immigration, a generic commercial environment that does little to present Australia or acknowledge the migrant's experience. We reflect on our own experiences of a lack of direction, confusion, a lack of familiarity, and the need for a sense of emotional support. Here, we propose weaving Tjukurpa, a weaving of a cultural fabric narrating the experience of the migrant while providing them with an understanding for indigenous connection to the land. This recognizes their bringing of new culture into a historical place.
This experience is created through two stages. The first located at the initial start, the Brisbane Airport. When entering the Brisbane Airport International Terminal, newcomers will be faced with our exhibit. Its organic form is derived from Indigenous basket weaving while depicting the Chinese understanding, the earth is square and the sky is circle. Migrants are welcome to enter the pavilion where a singular skylight allows for a sense of isolation from the overwhelming scenario, causing the migrant to reflect on their situation. The occupant is encouraged to participate in the exhibition by removing one of the bamboo strands from the framework and taking it with them on their journey. The removal of these strands creates a temporality in the structure, representing the transient state of isolation when entering the country. It is here our proposal enters into the second phase.
The migrant is encouraged to take the bamboo strand from the airport structure and journey to the second location, an installation in Musgrave Park, West End, Brisbane, an essential point of interest to the Indigenous peoples of Queensland, whose history and heritage is intrinsic to the Australian identity. The participant can then weave the strand taken from the airport structure into the Musgrave Park pavilion, furthering the narrative of evolving identities. The concentric but loose formwork of the Musgrave Park pavilion will also feature examples of migrant experiences and stories that encourage both migrants and Indigenous peoples to share their cultures and history. This gathering of communities lends to the evolving identities of those who come to Australia, creating an enriched and diverse Australian culture.
With a similar construction to the previous exhibition, the Musgrave Park Pavilion aims to connect the land it stands upon with its cultural significance to the Indigenous people. The form itself allows the inner wall to touch the ground, lifting the outer wall so as the migrant walks through, they appear not to be connected to the land until entering the central inner space. Additionally, the centre point of the structure can be a gathering space for Indigenous people to conduct their traditions, ceremonies, and culture with pride, creating a stage for them to magnify their voices and share their culture with the migrant. The installation can also host official ceremonies such as citizenships, where perhaps the migrant chooses to participate further in the structure by weaving in an item or fabric that represents their own culture.
While aimed for implementation within the Brisbane region, our concept can take form on a national scale, having temporal structures appear at international airport locations throughout Australia, with guided secondary installations appearing in significant Indigenous locations within the city, becoming a cultural symbol for the Australian migrant to experience. Weaving Tjukurpa showcases the narrative of the migrant experience in Australia, amplifies their voices, tells their stories, and creates a guided pathway for future migrants by demonstrating to them Indigenous connection to the land.